Good morning. Welcome to our learning. I want to call it a discussion, and I encourage you to ask questions, to comment. Let's make this an interactive learning experience. There was once a fellow who came into his doctor. He was an elderly man, and he says, "Doctor, I'm having problems. I'm forgetting things. I walk into a room and I'm not sure why I came in there. I leave the house and I forget where I was headed. It's really out of control. What do you think I should do, doctor?" Doctor says, "Pay me first, and then we'll have our consultation." Parshas Beha'aloscha, which is this week's Torah portion, tells us about several conflicting issues that took place with the Jewish people. The beginning of the Parsha is our travels, the plans of going towards Eretz Yisrael. We're gathering our things, and how is it that we travel, and so on. We have a lot of details of how the journey is supposed to take place. But later on, the Parsha moves on to sections which begin a trend or a multi-series of the Jewish people messing up drastically. You have complaining. You have later it's going to lead to the spies. Later you have Kairach. The middle of Parsha takes a turn, and it starts a series of Parshas, of Torah portions, which are going to be talking about things that are less than exciting, if you will, and it's not the greatest point of the Jewish people's history. But Torah has an interesting directive, which I think is, it has a very strong lesson. And that is that when you travel, Hashem wants that every stop that we came in our journey, now there are certain stops, we're 40 years in the desert, so certain stops we were there for 21 years, okay, a particular stop. There are other stops we're there for a day, for 2 days. It doesn't matter. Any place that you stop, part of the protocol is you take apart all of the stuff and you build the Mishkan. The Mishkan, of course, was the mobile temple. It traveled with the Jewish people. It was not a tent that you just flip up or flip down in 10 minutes. It was a tremendous project. There were beams and there were coverings and there was, the utensils have to be laid out. It was a tremendous undertaking to put together this Mishkan. And Torah says, wherever you are in the desert, doesn't matter where you stop, where you go, how long you're going to be there, you arrive, you set up this Mishkan. And it's a very strange thing. There were cases where we arrived someplace in the morning and at night you could leave. And somehow we have to put up the Mishkan. I mean, imagine you're doing a road trip with your family and you stop off somewhere at a motel for a night. The side of the highway, it was unplanned, you just stopped off. And imagine the mother says, okay, take out all the luggage from the trunk, bring it into the room, and unpack everything into each drawer and into each shelf, hang up what you can. And tomorrow morning, you pack everything up and you leave. It's a small stopover. You're just getting a little rest from the way. Why do we have to do this and unpack everything? And the same thing is when it comes to our time in the desert. If a journey, rather a stop, was for so short, then why do you have to make us build the whole Mishkan again? It's not like we're going to use it for a week. It's not like we're going to use it even for 2 days. It takes a long time to put it up. If you're moving, just move. So I want to share with you a letter from the Rebbe that he sent to the students of the yeshiva in Brunoise, which is a suburb of Paris. Great place, by the way. In the year Tafshin Yud Beis, which is 1952. Now, this group of yeshiva students had just moved their location They were obviously in Russia. They left Russia to get through Paris, and from there they were going to make their way to New York or to Israel, or depending who it was. And they were having a hard time settling and focusing on their learning in France because they felt this is just a stopover. This is not where we're going to be. They're waiting for visas, waiting for paperwork, waiting for invitations for visas, whatever the technical stuff that had to happen, but it could take months. But I'm in the middle of a journey. This is not where I'm going to set up shop. This is not where I'm going to end up living. So it was very hard for them to really focus and be present and do what they have to do. And the Rebbe sent them a letter. And the Rebbe says that why does Torah insist in this week's Parsha that every place that we stop, we should set up shop and build a Mishkan and have it there, even though it's only a temporary resting place, even though we're only there for a little bit? Because every step of your journey is important. Nothing is just, oh, whatever, for a second I'll run in and then I'll leave. I'll leave when I'm done. It doesn't work that way. Every single place that you end up, whether it's for an hour or it's for a year, you have a calling there. And in order to do that calling, you have to be fully present. Don't look at it and say, it doesn't really matter because I'm on my way. It doesn't make a difference because I'm just traveling to somewhere else. Your feet lead you to places where you have to be. And then everyone was telling them, focus on today. It's true you may not be here tomorrow. You may not be here in 6 months. You're traveling somewhere. But now you're here. Don't let that feeling steal your day. When you're 18, you can't focus on learning because you want to start working when you're 20. And when you're 20, you're not really focused on the work because you're thinking about how much you really need to make when you have a family. And when you start working and when you start having a family, you're rushing because you want to buy this dream house before you're 40. And then when you're 50, when you're 40, you're completely consumed with your job. And when you're 50, you start to regret. You're never present. And then I was telling these students, these yeshiva students, that you're part of your journey from Russia to get to a safer place. You're only going through France for a little bit, but this is your time in yeshiva. Do it. Be fully there. Be present. Use it out. And it's such a problem today in society that we get caught up in the next thing that we have to do. Your smartphone is in your pocket. Some other device is somewhere else. You're not here. You're on to the next thing. You're on to the next opportunity. And this is the message from this parsha. You stop for a day, build a Mishkan, because we're going to serve Hashem. We're going to worship. We're going to do what we have to do in the present sense, fully as if we're here forever. Because if not, then all your journeys are meaningless. All your stops are not maximized. And you could, God forbid, waste 40 years that way, which is a generation. Every moment has to be used. I want to give you another example of this that happened with the Rebbe. In the year 1960, 1970, the Rebbe was obviously Rebbe already for 20 years. It was a big milestone. Many Hasidim came from Israel even, chartered a plane, and they came to New York to spend it with the Rebbe. It's the yard site of the previous Rebbe. The day the Rebbe became Rebbe, it was a special time. And they came to spend almost 2 weeks in New York. Now, just picture in those days, you want to leave on an international flight. It's a charter flight. It's not like today where we're so used to you just run into the airport, you come in last minute, you get on and get off. Sometimes you come back the same day. International flights is not such a major deal. But back then in 1970, to come from Israel to New York, for most of these people, it was the first time in their lives on a plane. It was a major deal, travel. And the Rebbe was having a farbrengen, a farewell farbrengen, a goodbye to the Hasidim who were leaving. 770, the Rebbe's shul is packed. You have people from wall to wall. And the farbrengen, whenever it began, let's say 9:30 p.m., and they have to be on a 1 o'clock flight. They have to leave about 11. I don't know exactly the times, but they're sitting there, and the farbrengen goes, and it's getting later, and it's continuing. And these Hasidim are looking at their watches and looking at their suitcases and looking at each other, and they're not focused. They're not present. The Rebbe is here speaking to them. The Rebbe is here teaching them, helping them, inspiring them, but they're not here. They're somewhere else. So the Rebbe smiled and said, "Let me tell you a story. Years ago in Russia, in St. Petersburg, my father-in-law, the previous Rebbe, had a night that he spent meeting Hasidim, the Yechidus night. People used to come to him and talk. It's a very, very draining experience for a Rebbe because people come in, let's say they spend 20 minutes with the Rebbe, let's say less, and they share problems, spiritual problems, material problems. They ask for blessings, they ask for advice, and the Rebbe is fully, fully there for them and living their issues. In addition, it was a time when all of Judaism in this former Soviet Union was literally risking their lives on a regular basis. And the previous Rebbe was running this operation, was opening schools, sending people, making sure there's kosher food, mikvahs, and so on and so forth. And it was a big deal and very dangerous and constantly on the lookout. They could be killed at any time. And one of these nights, people were coming one after the other to speak to the Rebbe, to get advice, to get guidance, and so on. As it was finally finished, the whole night, the previous Rebbe had, I don't know, 15 minutes or half an hour until he has to leave to board a train. He was traveling somewhere. And to get onto that train was dangerous because you're Jewish and you're dealing with the 1920s in Russia. It's dangerous to travel. He is a person who is, let's just say, wanted to a great extent for his activities in spreading Judaism, which is considered counter-revolutionary in Russia. You're nervous before that trip. And the Rebbe says the story. I walked into my father-in-law's room. It was his father-in-law to be, because he was engaged to Rabbi Chaim Mushka. They weren't actually married yet. And he came in and he sees the previous Rebbe is involved in writing something, whether he was answering a letter or he was writing something and learning. But here's a man who just finished a whole night of meeting people and really guiding them. In a few minutes, he has to leave to the train station, which is very, very risky, dangerous, high pressure. Let's call it that. And he's here focused and he has 15 minutes, so he's writing something. Now, writing takes focus, it takes concentration. You have to think about what you're doing. It's not just, you're going to run around a little bit. And the Rebbe said I couldn't contain myself. And I asked him, I said, to such an extent? I mean, the organization and time management is phenomenal. But that level, you have 15, 20 minutes and you're using it for such a concentrated task. How is that even possible? And the previous Rebbe told me, he said, that there's a concept called success in time. We can't increase the time of our day. We all have the same 24 hours. But we could work on every minute to make it more effective. We could maximize every moment that we have in our life. And the way to do that, said the Rebbe, is if you take any task that you're doing, any job, whatever it is that you're doing right now, treat it like it's the only thing that exists in your life, in your day. It's the most important thing now. And if you could take whatever you're doing, you're reading a book, you're making a phone call, you're writing something, you're doing a chore, whatever it is, and treat that for the time that you're doing it as if it's the only thing you need to do and the most important thing that you need to do, then you'll maximize your time. Your concentration will be there. You won't make as many mistakes. You'll feel the value of it. And that's what the previous Rebbe told him. Of course, I have a train to catch soon. Of course, I just finished the whole night of meeting and guiding people. And it's draining and high pressure. But if these 15 minutes I could focus, and I do that by recognizing that this is the only thing that exists. I'm not thinking about yesterday, and I'm not thinking about an hour from now. I'm thinking about here. It takes effort, and you have to work on it and really try. But that's how you maximize time. And in the era that we live in, unfortunately, it's very rare because we're always on to the next thing. We don't concentrate. You're in the middle of doing something and your phone beeps or vibrates or some kind of light goes on, a blue or red, whatever it is, and tells you got a message. Maybe important, probably not for this second at least, but it pulls your concentration away from it and you're not there. You're not focused. And the Rebbe continued that the previous Rebbe told him a story about the Rashba. The Rashba, Reb Shmuel ben Aderes, lived in the 13th century. Great rabbi. He was a physician, an author of response of many, many books, and really the leader of Spanish Jewry in his time. He was a tremendous sought-after individual. Plus, he had a yeshiva, and he was very careful to give 3 classes a day. Now, if you give 3 classes a day, you got to prepare those classes. You have to deliver those classes. There's a lot of elements involved. But get this. Every single day, he had a routine. He would go for a 2-hour walk. 2 hours. And during this walk that he would take, he wouldn't be preparing his classes. He wouldn't be meeting with people. It was a walk, his time to relax, to clear his mind. He would go for a walk. How was it possible? A man with so many responsibilities, so many people looking to him for guidance, for help, for direction. He has his own things that he's doing. He's teaching, he's helping. And he explained the reason, the secret of how he was able to do it is because whatever the Rashba did, he focused on that and he said, this is the only thing I need to do now. This is the most important thing. When he was teaching, he wasn't thinking about his walk. And when he was dealing with patients or whatever else, he was not saying, oh, what more do I need to do now? Or what else, what's my next task? Or what's tomorrow? He wasn't doing several things at the same time. The key to being successful with time is to be present. And the way that you're present is you look at the task at hand as the most important thing and the only thing that you're focused on. You don't do one thing and then think about what's going to be, what was yesterday or what's in a few minutes from now. And the Rebbe explained in a similar vein that you have in the temple, there were many different tasks that had to be done. To bring an offering, they had to do the slaughtering the animal, they had to gather the blood, they had to bring the stuff over, different things. Offer it on the altar. But there's one element when you take the blood from point A to point B. Every single thing that you do has to be with concentration. You can't think about something else. If you're the kohen that's doing the offering, you can't think about something else. You have to be focused on what you're doing. And then everyone says, who cares? All you're doing is bringing the blood from point A to point B. Why is focus important? You're not slaughtering, you're not offering, you're not burning. You're just moving something over. Everyone says, from the Tzafnas Paneach, who's the Rogachover, a great genius, great scholar, previous generation. He explained anything that was involved in bringing an offering to God was important. It could seem technical. You may think, oh, what's the big deal? It's just a small, bringing something, transporting something. No. Transporting something for that becomes important. And we struggle with this, but we could change it. If you're doing it, if it's worth doing, it's worth focusing on. If you're shopping, if you're driving, if you're, helping somebody, be fully there. Don't text, obviously, when you drive. It's irresponsible. I'm talking to myself, by the way, about that. Don't do 20 things at the same time. It's not cool. It takes away from all of those things. You'll be much more effective. You'll feel more satisfied, and frankly, you'll gain more time in your day when you're focused. I want to share two other stories. There was a convention once in Minnesota. It was the Chabad Women's Convention years ago. And it was the middle of the winter. And on the way back, after an amazing convention, a bunch of women got stuck in the airport. Flights were canceled. It was in the 70s, Minnesota winter. So the organizer, she called the Rebbe's office and just let them know we're stuck in Minnesota airport. And she got an answer back from the Rebbe's secretary. The Rebbe wants to know what's this word stuck? No one's ever stuck. You're stuck means it wasn't my plan. It's not supposed to be this way. I'm stuck. It's like I ended up. And then I was telling her, you're not stuck. You're there for a reason. Use it out. And they actually did. They went around the airport. They found other Jewish women. They spoke to them about lighting Shabbos candles. But when you see your situation, you say, I'm not stuck. It's part of the journey. It's part of the plan. I'm here for a reason. So a lot of times in life, you have a setback. You end up somewhere where you don't think you should be. It's not according to your plan. You had other ideas. But if you realize that every place that you go, every stage in your life, you're accomplishing something. Hashem wants you there. It's divine providence. He put you there because he wants you to do something, and he needs you to do it in your way. Don't say, according to my plan, I shouldn't really be in this city or this place or whatever it is. According to my plan, no. This is the best plan for you. This is where you're supposed to be now, and this is what you have to maximize on. They tell the story about a fellow by the name of Elon. He lived in Israel. His wife's name was Dahlia, two beautiful children. And Elon didn't exactly love life. He did his thing. He woke up in the morning, fought a little bit with his wife, without too much patience, prepared his children to go to school. He was a short-tempered and annoyed individual. Came to work, he wasn't really interested, made a few phone calls, tried to make it through the day, didn't put in too much effort. Came home, he would argue a little bit, he would, it was just difficult. Read the paper, watch the news, go to sleep, and this is a routine. One day, Elon had some pain in his legs, unfortunately. And he went to one doctor, another doctor, and finally they told him that he needs to have surgery. He goes in for surgery, and as they're giving him the anesthesia, and he's like literally, falling asleep, he hears one doctor tell the other, the situation is so critical, I'd give him a month to live. And he falls asleep. Now he wakes up after the operation, and he's thinking about those last words that he heard from the doctor, which he wasn't supposed to hear, but he heard. And his wife and children are next to him in the recovery room. He's quite depressed after hearing that information. But he goes to sleep, and he wakes up and he decides, I'm going to maximize this month. And as soon as he recovered a little bit, he got up really, really early in the morning. He went to the bakery and bought fresh rolls for his family for breakfast. He was very friendly to everyone. He was always helpful around the house. He was really into doing what he can. And then he would spend time with his children. He even wrote a little bit of a diary or some memoirs and things, his perspective on life. And he made sure to go on a couple date nights with his wife and bought her some gifts. There's some old friends that he hadn't spoken to for a while, a few people that he had some fights with. He made up with them, and he really, really maximized. And as the month is concluding, he realizes that he's still here. And he's wondering, what happened here? How is this possible? And he went back to the doctor for a checkup. And he said, "Doctor, I got to tell you something. When you did the surgery, I heard what you said. And what changed?" Doctor laughed and he said, "I wasn't talking about you. There was another patient in the next room, and he actually did not make it. And I was telling the other doctor that I was doing the surgery with that he only has about a month to live, maybe. I was talking about him." And this Ilan realized that because he felt it was his final month in the world, which is a horrible feeling, obviously, no one should ever have to go through that, he maximized and utilized every moment to its fullest. And he couldn't have been happier. It changed his life. We began with a question. Why is it that when we traveled in the desert, every stop, and some of them were for a day or two, we had to put up the Mishkan and build it all over again and set it up for use if we may leave tomorrow morning? Because Hashem wants people to understand that when you travel somewhere, it's not just a middle of something you stop off. There's purpose, there's a reason. It's your mission to be here now. Be there fully. Don't look at it, this doesn't really matter. It doesn't. Look at life as if it's the most important day of your life. And that's how you're present. That's how you maximize your time. That's how you do things better. That's how you enhance your relationships, have more wholesome experiences, and you're way more productive. I want to give a brief update about the bag that was stolen. So yesterday in our mailbox at the office, all the mail was returned, and hopefully we'll meet the mailman today and mail lady today, and we'll be able to find out the details of what really happened and who gave it to her, how she got it. Maybe we'll get the other stuff, but I look forward to keeping you posted. But I'm very, very happy, Baruch Hashem, that we have the mail, and everyone should be safe and healthy. And I look forward to seeing you later today. Zai Gizot, have a wonderful, wonderful day.